Hi, my name is Jill, and I'm a student at the University of Texas at Austin. Today, I'm going to present the disinformation that was spread about Iran's retaliation after the killing of General Qasem Soleimani. So, a little bit of background to get us started. General Soleimani was the top military leader in Iran, and on January 3rd, 2020, the US assassinated him with a targeted drone strike. And 5 days later, on January 8th, Iran retaliated against the US with missile strikes on the Al Assad airbase, killing and injuring hundreds of US soldiers. Most people in the US think that this attack didn't have any severe after effects because the US news media neglected to cover the truth. The damage done to the base was so severe that while most of the base was destroyed, the US troops and equipment that did survive had to be transferred to a different base in Syria. Regarding American lives lost, the official numbers are found in the response to the Freedom of Information Act request by Congressman Benny Thompson. This Department of Defense statement details over 270 US military personnel wounded or dead as a result of this attack. And if you look at it, these numbers are horrifying. In fact, one of the most reputable Israeli journalists, Jack Corey, tweeted reporting 224 injured US soldiers arriving in Tel Aviv closely following the attack. There was even a dad from Chicago whose son was stationed at the Al Assad base. He hadn't heard from his son since the attack, and his plea for help is documented in this video.
Let's go to Alan, Chicago Ridge, Illinois, Democratic caller. What are your thoughts, Alan?
U.S. media has told us there is no casualty there, but my only child didn't answer me for 1 week. I don't know if he's alive or he's dead.
Iran promised a hard revenge, and they got it. This never-ending conflict in the Middle East is costing us far too many American lives, and yet President Trump wants us to maintain our presence in the region, and to prevent backlash from US citizens, he's controlling our media to censor what we see and what we don't see. I don't know if you remember, but following the missile attacks, all we heard about was the Ukraine flight that was shot down by Iran. There was almost nothing about the US soldiers who were killed at the Al Assad base. And for some of y'all who might not believe the facts I just presented, you're absolutely right in being skeptical. All of the evidence I showed you in that video was fake. Yes, everything. After the Al Assad missile attacks, there were actually 0 casualties on the American side, thanks to our defense capabilities. But these were real pieces of disinformation that the Iranian government circulated via the IRIB following those missile attacks. So let's start this introduction thing again. Hi, my name is Jill, and the real topic of my project is disinformation. By the end of this video, you'll have an understanding of how disinformation campaigns work, the serious psychological effects they can have, and what you can do to protect yourself and your friends and family from falling victim to these disinformation campaigns. To start, here are my operational definitions of a few terms. Some key points are that disinformation is deliberate and intentional, while misinformation is more like a mistake. Also, I'll be using information operations, IO, influence operations, psychological operations, PSYOP, and disinformation campaigns interchangeably. All right, to start, an information operation needs to have a specific goal, a message to spread. For example, when the Iranian government was using all of this fake information, it was to convey a message of strength, power, and success to their people. And some insider information, most influence operations targeted at the US, their goal is to politicize us, to divide us. Second, to convey a message effectively, it has to be catered to the specific audience. In my video, I was targeting you. Now, if you're watching this, you're most likely a student or professor who goes to UT and is in the Middle Eastern Studies department. This generally points to having liberal values, disliking President Trump, and being more sympathetic towards people in the Middle East, and maybe a bit critical of US military presence there. So I used that profile to spruce my video with rhetoric that supported it, all in the goal to entice you to be more receptive towards my message. Which brings me to the third element. When people have a strong emotional reaction to something, especially a negative emotion like anger or fear, they're more vulnerable to the message because their rational thinking gets clouded by emotions. Research has shown that social media posts that arouse anger are proven to capture more people's attention and spread faster on social media. This is because when we see news that angers us, we switch from system 2 thinking to system 1 thinking, which is best explained by Daniel Kahneman in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, which I definitely recommend. But to simplify it, instead of processing information slowly and deliberately, we start thinking fast based on instinct and emotion as opposed to logic and reason. So those are the 3 elements of information operations. And the thing that makes them different from regular communication is that all these elements are meticulously premeditated. Think of a psychopath versus a regular person. A psychopath is charming, seems trustworthy, and quite normal. But unlike a normal person, they're intent on manipulating and deceiving everyone they interact with. They carefully select exactly who they want to talk to and what they want to get out of the interaction before they even begin. And that's what makes psychopaths and influence operations so effective. So you might be thinking, why is this important? Why does it matter? How does it affect my life? Well, research shows that disinformation campaigns can have these effects on us. To highlight a few, they increase distrust in our government, decrease our likelihood to vote, and can radicalize people to resort to violent means. Not to mention that these campaigns manipulate our thought. Right now, especially, we're all quarantined at home, everyone's on their phones getting news from the internet, and that makes us especially vulnerable to false information. Right now, China's launching hundreds of disinformation campaigns against us, and Russia is too, with our elections coming up. During our last presidential election, there were 126 million social media users who saw articles and posts created by Russian sources. I mean, they're at our throats trying to make us point fingers at each other and play the blame game by dividing our political sphere and exploiting our fears and basic human nature. These are dangerous threats to the integrity of our democracy and our freedom of thought, which is why defending the truth is so important. Now, this fake news media landscape is really new to us. Questioning if a headline or video is true or not, I mean, we've never had to do this before. But for the people living in Iran, this constant state of news paranoia is normal to them and has been for decades because their news is filtered by their government. So I got tips from Iranians on how they navigate their news to help us navigate our changing news landscape. So here are 3 things you can do to protect yourself and your friends and family from influence operations. Number 1 is to think slowly. When we're scrolling through social media, we're kind of zoned out and relaxed. But when we see a news headline or video or political meme, we have to stop, pause, and ask ourselves, does this sound too good to be true? Does it look like it could be playing off my emotions like anger or fear? Is it coming from a reputable news outlet? And what biases does that source have? Take a quick second to ask yourself these things, to switch from that autopilot system 1 thinking to think slowly and deliberately with system 2. And just that awareness can help you from falling into those traps. Number 2 is to check multiple news sources for accuracy. After you've seen the news and you followed tip number 1, so you're a little bit skeptical, the next step is to do some digging. Channel your inner FBI detective and find out if the story you read is consistent with other reputable news sources. Check a diverse array of perspectives. This is key to separate facts from opinions and analysis. So before you buy into some clickbait headline and share it with your friends, find the least common denominator of what's really happening to see if the facts are being presented honestly and accurately. And the last tip is to encourage productive dialogue. We all know the long Facebook rants and angry comment sections, so if you're posting something or commenting on a friend's post, first make sure it's grounded in facts, and second, be receptive to people's responses. Instead of shutting them down or arguing back and forth, start a civilized conversation. In the military, there's this phrase, HUA, stands for heard, understood, acknowledged. And that's kind of what we can do. Say like, hey, I hear you. I understand where you're coming from. And acknowledge their point. And then bring attention to your facts. And add, I'd be curious to know where you're getting your information from. Or I'd love to know your reasoning behind this because this is the conclusion I came to. And it doesn't need to be patronizing. Just show you're genuinely curious. This can help counter politicization and spread understanding to help us learn and work together in truth. So to recap, when reading headlines or sharing posts on your social media, remember to think slowly, check for accuracy, and encourage productive dialogue. Disinformation is working its way into our lives, especially right now, but we can defend against it one person at a time. If we keep these tips in mind and spread awareness, we can work together to preserve our democracy and our freedom of thought. So with that, stay sharp and thank you for listening. And hook 'em horns.